Do I have a mess going on or what? So we are back. As you can see, I have collected more monitors than any one person needs, much less one person living in a really tiny space. There is a story back here, but first I want to say thank you for joining me back here and being patient at Road Culture Rules. My name is Jill, and today we're going to really be talking about working in a tiny space, whether it's a tiny home, a van, a trailer, an RV. Not everybody gets a check every month. Some people have to figure out how to make this lifestyle work, both full-time and part-time. There's quite a few things to consider, so we're going to take a deep breath, hold it for 4, exhale, and see you on the other side. You could aim for perfection, but keep it close or you'll lose. So there's a lot to consider, and the biggest thing I think you really have to think about before you even get started, if you can, is one, are you going to be working full-time? Are you going to be working part-time? Are you going to be working inside your trailer or your van? Or are you going to be working in an outside job? Because the number one constraint I have had in terms of doing work outside the trailer is the dog and the cat, because the cat usually is okay, but the dog, I can't leave him trapped in here, 12, 14 hours at a time with, very little access to movement because I'm off at a job someplace. The summer it's too hot, the winter it's not quite as bad. But the other big concern is in the summertime, if you're in a little tiny vehicle like this or a little working space and the air conditioning goes out, they're not going to make it. So it's a little more complicated when you're in a small space in terms of how you want to think about working outside, which is one of the reasons why I focused on working inside, which creates its own set of problems. But they are the number one thing that I am concerned and worried about. There are others, but we wanted to start with number one. So the other thing I wanted to throw out there before we keep going is that I've seen two ways of people doing this. One is that they have a full-time job or career, and then they buy a trailer or an RV, some kind of vehicle, in which to support their current working. And a lot of those people go home on the weekends or they go home on a regular basis. The flip side is that you want to live this life, but the question you have to ask yourself is, how are you going to support it in a full-time or part-time, depending on what your economic requirements are, manner? And that makes it a little bit more complicated, because if you already have a full-time job and you are using this kind of vehicle to support your lifestyle, you really know what you need ahead of time, because this kind of experience can be very limiting if you don't plan accordingly. And most of that planning comes in the fact that if you're doing this in a very simple way, it's very time consuming. So if you have a full-time job plus a lot of travel time, then you don't want to be like me out hauling around getting your water, trying to negotiate the whole shower thing. You really want to have as comprehensive a vehicle and setup, and that usually means parking someplace where all the amenities are there, because you don't have the luxury of a lot of extra time to get this kind of stuff done. This lifestyle in its simplest, most rural or disbursement, boondocking, camping kind of environment is very labor intensive, which makes any kind of full-time job extremely difficult. So some of the other things that come up is it depends on what your working skill set is. Do you have space for the tools? What kind of resources do you need? Obviously if you're doing the digital nomad thing, you have to have electricity in some way, shape, or form. Now, I do not recommend my massive monitor plan that I've got going over here, but what happened is, again, I never left planning to live like this. I only just wanted to be in a temporary status, and then I would move into an apartment or house and desktops would be normal. It's hard to figure out how to get rid of the old ones. I do have a plan for that. We'll be talking about that shortly. But it's, something that you need to think ahead of time is what kind of in-place requirements are you going to need in terms of space? And one of the other big ones is cleanliness. Are you going to be able, if you're in a really dirty job, are you going to be able to get clean? Are you going to be able to wash your clothes often enough? Out here we have a bunch of those great big tall wind turbines, and I met a guy who was doing that, and he had a washer dryer inside his massive trailer. And he wore the same thing every day. He would just throw the clothes in there every night, get dressed, go back out, do it all over again. You'll find it more helpful if you think about it before you leave than try to patchwork it together after you leave. Like some of us, it's made it a little bit more complicated. And the other requirements are, if you're working for somebody else, is getting out. I have a lot of trouble on these back roads in terms of getting stuck. So weather is a consideration, climate is a consideration, utilities, electricity, water, trash, things like that. So those are all just little pieces that you might want to think about if you really are going to try and work full-time, especially. Part-time, you can get away with a lot more, but full-time work is extremely complicated if you're trying to do hardcore nomad traveling. Even if you are a digital nomad, there needs to be the ability to stay consistent. And so, my least favorite comment, on these videos is you're not a nomad because you don't move. And it's like, I got to earn money. And if earning money means staying put, that's what I have to do. And that's really part of this whole process, is that we have to think about what's best for you and how you can support that, because not everybody has a regular check coming in every month. And even if, the few people that are doing this via YouTube and making a living at it, which is not me, is that that's not a guarantee. We've all seen that, where the income just goes away. So the next piece to that is to be really flexible, and that's what I've had to be. I've had to be extremely adaptable. I've done so many different kinds of jobs. I've cleaned bathrooms, cleaned out a lot of manure. See me, I've tossed hay, I've built websites, I've done marketing, I've done writing samples for people, I've done house sitting. I've done way more things than I can count on these 10 fingers, just to make sure that I can survive and get by. And I still hold my social work license, so that is always out here, but that's really a full-time job, and you have to be licensed in each state. I still hold it back in California, but not in New Mexico. Whole separate story. But I always hold that so that just in case, if I ever need to go back to a full-time income, if life changes that requires me to make some pretty drastic changes, that I still have that to fall back on. But hey, so far so good. Another consideration is appearance. And, I've talked about this before, but it's really easy to get lazy about getting pretty frumpy and dirty and kind of homeless looking, which is okay when you're just by yourself, but it really does not fly if you're trying to gain some kind of employment from other people. And it's difficult when other people know you live this way, in terms of not wanting to think that you're a drug addict, that you're irresponsible, that you're lazy, that you're unreliable. So you really have to work extra hard to put forth the image that, not the image, but to really be to be considered to be taken seriously, because people are taking a risk on you, because you do kind of look like you might take off at any time. And that's probably another consideration. If you're really looking to do full or part-time work, are you willing to stay in one place a long time? Are you willing to do any kinds of commitment in order to get a job done? And that's where, seasonal work is awesome. There's so many things that are temporary work status that this kind of lifestyle would support. But if you're really wanting to work for somebody in a full-time capacity for the long term, you have to be honest about that. Can you stay? Is that something that you're willing to do? Because the most important thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to burn bridges, because even though you're traveling, you never know who you're going to be running into again, and you never know when you might have to go back. And that's happened to me several times, where I have left and then come back, or gone back to people that I've worked with or stayed with before. And that's really worked out, for the most part, in my favor in terms of not burning bridges and always trying to choose to be responsible. So that's just kind of a quick overview of something to think about. One of the things I think that I've noticed is that, younger people are either just temporary traveling, or they're doing, little jobs to support their traveling lifestyle with the idea of going back to some other kind of conventional life. Older people, a lot are retired or have some kind of monthly check, whether it's disability or a pension or Social Security. And so there's another group of us that don't really fall into either of those categories, and not everybody can be a famous YouTube person. So some of us have to figure out other ways to earn income. And the most important thing, I think, is to really figure out what your skill set is and how could you support it in a mobile lifestyle. I personally think that there are huge opportunities here, and it's something that I'm going to keep talking more about, but I wanted to just start with this as I am now able to be up and running, although I have to caveat that I haven't actually tried to edit anything. Yesterday was a whole thing in terms of trying to get the program downloaded. Another problem with living out in the middle of nowhere. So we held our breath all day long. Okay, I did, they didn't, but I held my breath all day long just hoping to get the program downloaded. Today, we'll see if it works, and then hopefully we'll be coming back to you on a regular basis here at my YouTube channel. So with that, I want to say thank you for your patience and for joining me here. But before we go, we're going to take one more deep breath for the road as we rise with the sun in our eyes, love in our heart, feet firmly on the ground as together we walk on survival road one step at a time. Live free, die wild, my friend, and we'll see you next time.